Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today we have a special guest with us. It's my friend Gerry McGuire. How are you doing?
Excellent. Thank you. Very well.
Gerry, you and I, we've run into each other in the past, sometimes during conferences, other times during your work, which I'll get into. But for
Yeah.
people who don't know who you are, can you give us a little background?
Well, yeah, I've owned a limo service in Vancouver for nigh on up to 35 years and a half now. And, well, I've got a bachelor's in economics from Simon Fraser. And I read a lot, real books too. And I spend a lot of time doing research on the web, of course, where everybody does now. But the web is like ooh, it's a maze trying to find the truth on the web now. It really is. So my background, anything you want to ask about my background? Married, divorced for 30 years now and a half. Yeah, et cetera, et cetera. Two kids, two grown kids. Yeah.
All right. Well, I actually kind of brought you on for selfish reasons because I've recently decided to run for federal office. And I was thinking
Yeah.
about you the other day. We met at a conference when me, you, and Brian Peckford were talking, and you told me that you ran as a candidate for mayor of Vancouver. And
True.
I wanted to bring you on, and I wanted to pick your brain as to,
Sure.
let's start with, why did you run? What motivated you to run?
Well, it was a sort of a life thing. I felt I'd reached a stage where I'd taken a lot out and I ought to give some back. And I just emerged from a very negative relationship, and I just wanted to like shake that dust off my heels and plunge into something positive, and you know, bring up some issues that, well, and I saw Gregor Robertson. Gregor Robertson was such a bad mayor that I couldn't see how I could lose. You know, he really was. Yeah, he just kept going and going. I don't know if he got 2 terms or 3 terms. But anyways, yeah, I just thought he was, I mean, horrible. Yeah, yeah. He bought in. He brought in a city manager who was a former Chicago bureaucrat, a green bureaucrat, and that's when the bike lane started exploding.
Um, let's pick up on that because I hate Mayor Gregor. I hated him when I was living downtown. What
Yeah.
did you not like about him?
Well, very policy. On a personal level, he's very friendly and accommodating, which is why he made a great sock puppet for for the UN agenda. Basically, everything he's doing was UN agenda. ICLEI, ICLEI, if I'm not mistaken, his policies. That's what I hated about him. Personally, it's hard not to like the guy. You know, friendly, handsome, semi-intelligent. He's not as quite as dumb as they like to make him out to be, but he's not Einstein either. But okay guy. But it was all policy. It was the policy. It was the implementation of a policy, a top-down policy, and you could see it in everything they did. Basically, UN agenda at the time, it's what they call Agenda 21. It's now been relabeled to Agenda 2030, and it's horrific.
Well, what if I played devil's advocate and I said the world's going to hell. We've put too much CO2 in the atmosphere. We're all going to die. So what's wrong with the bike lanes?
Well, even if you even if you accept CO2, the theory of man-made CO2 global warming, even if you accept that, the bike lanes are a fart in a hurricane. And really, really, and if you do a cost-benefit analysis, there's There's a lot of cost and very little benefit. Sort of like the COVID lockdowns. Found to be almost zero benefit. Heavy cost in terms of human suffering and death and economic damage. Zero benefit, literally zero benefit for the lockdowns. Same idea.
Are you living downtown right now?
Yeah.
I moved out in 2019, I think. I just couldn't take it. Uh, do they still close? I remember they were like closing an entire street for biking. Was it Beach Avenue?
Well, that was during the lockdown. Yeah. Yeah. That was during the lockdown. Um, but now Beach Avenue is like one way, and they put a bike lane on half of it,
Hmm.
and now it's just one way. And I think they might be doubling that. They might be taking those out. I'm not sure, but yeah, they had it. In fact, they had Stanley Park completely closed down for bicycles for a while. That went over like a lead balloon. Yeah. So yeah. So
Um,
yeah, I live right near there. I live right near beach. Yeah. But yeah, that's what's going on. You want to go to 1011. You want to go to 1011 beach. You got to sneak down. You got to sneak down Furlough, turn left down the back lane, and loop around, make a right hand turn. And there's a lot of things like that downtown now too, where you've got to go anywhere from 4 to 8 blocks to get 2 blocks. Right.
I
And
actually
that's
wanted to mention that. Sorry, the one that really kills me, Dunsmuir and what is it, Homer? Like if you're coming down Dunsmuir and you don't make a right on Homer, I think it's Homer. You basically have to go for like 6 blocks until I don't know.
Oh yeah. There's no right turn. There's no right turn at all the way
Yeah.
down to Burrard maybe. Yeah, I don't think there's a right turn all the way from Homer to Burrard. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
and that
that's real cost. That's real cost. That's real human cost. That's real economic cost in terms of you're burning more fossil fuels, which of course is the devil. And yeah, it's cost. It's real cost. And what's the benefit next to zero? I'm
looking
sure there are
like
cycling advocates who would argue otherwise, but I don't hold those arguments.
it's funny I brought you on here to ask about your race as mayor, but it's turning into a bicycle bashing session. but but I
That is in large part what inspired it to begin
okay.
with, and that's when I started going up to city council in 2009. Is when I started to study, because it was all about climate change, global warming, climate change. It was the subject du jour. I started researching it, and like within an hour and a half, it was like, oh, this is a can of worms.
It's a very green city, Vancouver, and that's part of the reason I moved out because I'm more of a business oriented guy. I like a hands off government. Let me run my company. I'm not, don't regulate me to death. And Vancouver's the opposite of that.
Well, when you say green city, you mean red city.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, because that's all it is. It's all communitarianism, you know, groupthink. It's socialism. It's creeping socialism, and it's more and more regulation. And the more regulation, the less the benefit, and the more the cost. So it's been the way since beginning of time, But yeah,
So,
Vancouver. Yeah.
sorry, before I ask, before we get on to your race, you've been living in Vancouver for longer than I have. how have you seen the regulations? Has it always been, like Mayor Gregor sort of vision, or was there a time when it was manageable, Vancouver?
Well, ironically, Vision Vancouver had it was the turning point when they got elected. There was no, actually, Sam Sullivan was very UN oriented too, UN agenda oriented. He was the one who invented eco density, the term eco density, right? Justifying blockbusting in terms of saving the planet. That was Sam Sullivan. Wait, goes even further back, and he was NPA, if I'm not mistaken. You know? Before that was Cope. Cope was. It's always Vancouver's always been left being the left coast. And, you
All right. Okay, so on to my question. You and I, when we were talking at that conference, you told me that you were running as an outsider. Is that correct?
yeah,
Independent outsider in the
independent.
sense that your views. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to be independently wealthy to have a chance.
And how many votes did you get? Give me the breakdown.
Yeah, pulling out off my top of my head, Gregor had about 72,000. Suzanne Anton, very weak candidate, had about 65,000. About 60. She was way behind. It wasn't real close. And then there was a third party. I forget. Neighborhood NSV, Neighborhoods for a Sustainable Vancouver, had about 5,000, and I was well back even of them with 1,195. And then there were the other 8 stragglers with 400 or less.
And what was your campaign pitch like? Because coming in as an independent, it must have been difficult.
Um, yeah, basically better administration, better response to public needs. A bit, not real exciting. Like is it, you know, well, every administration makes bad mistakes. And they're vulnerable, but the NPA didn't have any serious candidate, and they didn't really have a counter to what Vision Vancouver was offering, which was a noble um, foray into the future, into the green future, which of course is actually a foray into old-fashioned socialism. You know. So they've actually outlawed now natural gas in new construction. It's a disaster. What happens to your heat pump when we have a cold snap like we had in 1967, where it was minus 20 for 2 weeks in a row? I think there's a limit where heat pumps don't work anymore when it gets so cold, and that's below that limit. What if people are going to 2 weeks without heat? It's insane.
What about you and I were talking? Like, how much money do you need to become mayor?
Well, rough guesstimate, even back then, today probably close to similar. Um, I would guesstimate about 5 million. I don't know what Tim Sims spent, but of course there's all kinds of soft costs that you cover too. But he hovered over 2 elections. Yeah, he was very patient, very I would say predatory, but he crouched in the weeds until it was, till the opposition was weak enough, and he'd been putting together a team for probably about 6-7 years before he won the last election. Now, predatory is not a good word, I don't think, but in a way, that like I say, he was there, like just waiting. Just, and there was money there. Hedge fund guy too. So, Rosemary Rock Salt business, Rosemary Rock Salt. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what his game is, but it seems to be just more of the same. Like United Nations, Italy, C40. Have you ever heard of C40?
Which one? No?
Well, C40 is the municipal. You actually become a member of C40, and it's a United Nations organ, and it's implementing Agenda 2030 through municipal politics. Because municipal, you can a city like Vancouver, probably 550,000 people now. You can control a $1 billion budget, more than that. I don't know what the big city budget is anymore. But the cops were, so the city budget is 3 to 5. You can control $5 billion worth of expenditures with 8% of the population, because the percentage of people voting is so low. Literally 8%. 8% of voters will win. The other candidate gets 7% of qualified voters. Because your turnouts are about 15 to 16% municipally, even in Vancouver.
It's terrifying.
Well, it's a great return on investment for people who want to develop high rises everywhere and things like that. And implement an anti-human agenda, which Agenda 2030 is. I keep coming back to that, but that's their manifesto, really. And if you look at what it is, and again, I've actually never would sit down and read a whole copy of it, but what I've read of it, it's no cars, no meat, no fossil fuels. It's absolute insanity, because it's just, well, the ultimate goal is depopulation. That gets you looks like crazy conspiracy theories, but they repeat it again and again. Too many people, humanity is a virus, etc., etc. That was actually King Charles' father, who was famous for saying that. You mentioned somebody at a party who said that to you, but it was Queen Elizabeth's husband was Philip, who actually was most famous for saying that humanity is a virus on the planet. And that's absolute absurdity, because we're actually husbands of the planet. We create growth, we farm, etc., etc. So, yeah, where are we going now? Yeah.
Why do you think they? I agree with you with the depopulation thing, because they don't actually even have to say it. But when they want to reduce carbon, and you and I are made of carbon, and we breathe out CO2, you can kind of make the connection of what they mean. But why do you think there's this push for 15-minute cities, densification, urbanization?
Is there 15-minute cities are big rail cars. They can't literally herd people into rail cars like they did in World War II. So they're herding them into big cars. It gives you total control over the population. disarmed, demobilized. Easy. Boom.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the question I asked was kind of loaded. I was leading the witness, but I've lived in these cities, and I've kind of moved out to the countryside. I'm in a suburb now, but I've also lived in the
Mm-hmm.
countrysides. The further you get from the city, the more, I don't know, real the people get. Conversely, when you move into the city, the right to bear arms is gone because the bullet's going to go through like eight adjoining neighbors' houses. The right to defend yourself or your woman, that's gone because you just call a cop and the cop shows up. Food doesn't grow on a farm; it grows in the supermarket. So I think you get where I'm going with this.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's disconnected. It's a disconnected existence. Yeah. Yeah. You're disconnected from the source of life. Yeah, from the realities. Easy control. Everybody swallows more or less the same media. The message is controlled throughout all the major internet sources and television, radio, and newspapers. I'm probably one of the last people in Vancouver that still reads a newspaper. TV and radio, and now it's Google and TikTok and Snapchat, and WhatsApp. They're all controlled by a few major corporations, and they're all tied in with, here we go again, Agenda 2030. They're all adherents to it. It's Malthusian. It's a the theory that resources are limited and humans multiply like rabbits. But the reality of the situation is that, in fact, the key resource throughout history has been humanity. Humanity's creativity and humanity's ability to transcend their problems, to overcome and transcend their problems. That's the real infinite resource. The universe is infinitely available. It's got, but it's all locked up in here, right? The idea that we need less people because there's not enough resources is the exact opposite of truth. The more people we have, the more resourcefulness we have, and the more resources we're able to unlock, because the earth itself is likely regenerating oil. There's huge, they say there's underground water greater than the ocean, and that some people have learned to tap it. And it's the term abiotic oil, that oil is actually created through geological stresses, and it's proven in many cases where dry wells have all of a sudden become exploitable again. Our resources are almost literally infinite. It's all locked up in here. So if you believe that we need to get rid of people because we don't have enough resources, you're locking the actual resource.
Jerry, are you familiar? I think it was called the Biodiversity Treaty. It's another one of these UN nonsense treaties.
I've seen it. I've seen it pass by my screen. I'm sure it's the same old, same old. It basically locks up huge areas of wilderness and prevents us from exploiting the resources that are there, that are beneficial to humanity.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And what I'm trying to say is these guys are all bastards. So whether
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
pull, like I'm glad we agree. Whether it's a pull, like the UN puts out Agenda 2030, and they say they want to move everyone off the land and into
yeah,
15-minute cities, or whether it's something
yeah,
like the biodiversity treaty where they say we have to preserve our wildlife, so we're going to come up with these wildlife corridors that no one can go in, and the consequence of that is that you have to leave your farm and go live in downtown Vancouver. These
yeah,
bastards
yeah.
are hurting us in that direction.
Yeah, well, like I say, it's easier than getting you on an actual train car. It's an open air concentration camp. Exactly what it is. All right, nothing more, nothing less.
um, what do you think about like in Vancouver, who owns the land? I don't mean like all the land, but I have a suspicion that the majority of the people that live in Vancouver are renters. Is that correct?
I would think it is. I well, I don't want to say for sure. It's high percentage at the minimum. Yeah, oh, high percentage at the minimum.
I just wonder what effect that's going to have, because you said with 8% of the population or voting population, you can kind of control
Yeah,
the city.
yeah,
The people that live there, they're allowed to vote, right?
yeah, yeah,
So it's like you have the people that own the land, they pay for the services that the people that vote, these people in power, they 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 cause those services to happen, like four
yeah,
different trash bins and Lord knows what else, like putting a
yeah,
chandelier underneath Granville Bridge.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, that's why I told.
Yeah, yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. It'd be nice if it looked good for 50 years, but it wouldn't.
Yeah, I guess where I was going with that though was it's a very dangerous situation where the people making the decisions are not the ones that are paying for the consequences of those decisions.
But flip that over, and if you could activate that basin, you probably could. You could win back, win back power.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I mean that's happening in a lot of the smaller cities. Thornhill, Alberta. Did you hear about that one?
Thornhill, Alberta? No.
It was a small farming hamlet, and they came up with all of these rules. Like you can only have four chickens. If you want to put barbed wire, you need a permit, and they revolted.
Well, yeah, small town Alberta, you can do that. Yeah, Vancouver's a behemoth. Yeah, a lot harder to turn Vancouver around, but it's not impossible. It's a lot harder and they lot more money. Yeah. What were we talking about last night? Um, anyway, yeah.
Going back to you said about $5 million for the mayor to run for mayor. Most of us don't understand any of this. Like we just assume that you put your name in and you go to a couple of do a couple of speeches and then people vote for you. Where does that $5 million have to go?
Promo through both major media outlets, buying buying advertisements, and also through flyering. A lot of flyering and hiring door knockers. You need door knockers for sure to spread the message and say, Paymon's a great guy, and here's his platform, and this is why you should vote for him. Door knocking is key, I suspect. I've seen something. I actually saw an article about that just recently that suggested that door knocking is key.
Is there a limit to how much money you can spend on a municipal race?
I don't know. I don't know. It's been it's been like almost 12 and a half years since I ran, and I don't know. Like I said, there's soft costs too, right? So I'm not sure. I know there are donation limits, but if you have your own money, then maybe you can spend whatever you like. I'm not sure. That's where Ken Sim might have had an advantage over the punk star from SFU, Kennedy Stewart. Yeah. So let me see now. How are you going to win? What, you're running West Vancouver, right?
Oh yeah, I'm running in Westman, but it's a federal election.
Yeah. And they tend to vote for leaders, more or less. Local candidates can make a difference, but they do tend to vote for leaders. They have a lot of sway. So yeah, a lot of door knocking. If you have allies in the media, that helps. I didn't. Have you ever heard of Charlie Smith?
No.
Until recently, he was the editor of the Georgia Straight, and he told me privately that he thought I was the smartest candidate. And then he went and endorsed the dumbest one. I never really forgave him for that. Yeah. Never really forgave him for that. So what else? How else? What do you got to do in West Vancouver? West Vancouver's a lot of money. They tend to be more conservative. You have a better chance in West Vancouver, I'd say, than you would in, say, East Vancouver. No doubt about that. Yeah, they tend to be more conservative, but again, a lot of champagne socialists there. So I don't know. Climate. Where to go with climate? Do you even bring up climate because because the mainstream will crucify? I've been a guilty of not going to council and bringing up things like the fact that polar bear populations are larger now than they've ever been, the fact that Arctic sea ice is not melting, the fact that Antarctica ice is at record level, which is it's a 30-year record they have of it, but it's grown every year they've measured it. Did I mention the Great Barrier Reef is at record levels of coral? Uh, what else? Ocean levels are rising microscopically almost compared to the 400 feet that they rose since the last ice age, right? Oh yeah, they're finding sunken cities all over the world now, in India, Egypt, etc. You name it, everything they've said about climate and global warming has proven untrue, and they're still pushing it, doubling down, talking about global. Now they call it global boiling, just to make people freak out more. Kids are committing suicide because the climate future is so bleak, or so they believe. Right? It's absolutely egregious.
So what happens when you teach people to think negatively?
Hmm?
They're just teaching people how to be negative. It's a negative outlook. They did it all through my youth. So let's go back like 30 years. What was it?
Sure.
It was global cooling, and then it was sorry?
Well, that was more like 50 or 60. That was the 70s.
Right, right. So global cooling was before with me, but then they came out
Yeah.
with the ozone layer. That was the 70s. There was
Yeah.
global warming, there was
Yeah.
desertification, global famine, the killer bees. Like it was always something else, you know. The only thing they never pitched was a zombie apocalypse here.
It sells. It sells on media. You know, headline. It's headline stuff. You got to have some kind of something to get the populace excited to watch your broadcast or to buy your newspaper or to listen to your radio show. And you say the headline, future bright, no apocalypse imminent. What kind of headline is that? You need to sell newspapers with that?
Yeah.
No.
Nothing to report today. Everything's well.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. 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 In fact, the the well-being index for humanity has improved every year for the last 30, 40 years. There's less poverty. There's better medical care. People throughout the world are in general getting better medical care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Good news doesn't sell.
Before we leave the topic of whatever, this is all UN nonsense, climate change, have you read or are you aware of the World Health Organization pandemic treaty?
Very much so. I've been following that daily basis. And Trudeau can't sign Canada up fast enough for it. It's horrendous. It's the end of freedom as we know it. It's a coup. It's a United Nations coup. Literally total control over the vast majority of the world's population. They can tell you what to take, not to take. They can decide what is a pandemic and what isn't a pandemic. In fact, COVID was never a pandemic by the definition of a pandemic before 2009. It never had a high enough kill rate. It was widespread, but it didn't have a high enough kill rate to be called a pandemic before 2009. They changed the definition in 2009, and 11 years later, they locked down the world because of a disease that did not have a very high kill rate. So, given total control over virtually the whole world, holy cripes! Now that's Hunger Games stuff. That's scary as hell. It's the end of freedom as we know it. Hopefully, the United States is able to install a government later this year that will resist that treaty, because if the United States signs up, it's all over. It's literally everything else is almost immaterial. That's a horrible so-called treaty. They're not even calling it a treaty anymore, because if they call it a treaty, then the U.S. Senate has to approve it. So now it's just called an agreement. Yeah, I've been following that on a daily basis. It's nasty.
I've been following it too. Let's look the One Health approach. That clause of One Health approach where they're trying to tie health, human health, with animal health and plant life health, and the health of the ecosystem, water, land, air, basically climate change. So these, like, they have no shame. Like, they see that climate change, this whole argument's not working. They're like, why don't we take it, we'll merge it with health and the pandemic, and we'll tie it in a nice bow, and John Q. Public, that they won't know any better.
Well, that's what COVID was. COVID was a dry run. COVID was a virtual clone of the climate hoax, and it succeeded so well. They're like, oh, now, yeah, you're exactly right. And now we're on to something. Push this. Let's push this. This is what we can work with. This is where we can get that ultimate control that we've been seeking with the climate hoax for so long. Oh yeah, total control is the game. And when they have total control, then we have none. And when we have no control, they can do anything they want to us anytime, anything, anywhere, anyhow. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it with, the Emergency Act. We
Yeah,
have, we have, we have a small victory there. But they're not even giving up yet on that. They never will give up. It's just one thing after another after another. And we got to resist, resist, resist.
I will
So,
say some glimmer of hope is the fact that the Liberal Party has pursued this hard left agenda to the limit. Like I think they've squandered the wealth of this nation, and now that that's gone, people are starting to get angry. So you see that Trudeau's not like he's just no longer a capable leader. He can't come out and I don't know lie for the party. So the MPs like Guilbeault are forced to come out and lie. Chrystia Freeland was forced to come out and say that she was going to appeal the case. She looked like hell. So I don't like their ability to destroy the country. It's winding down. Unfortunately, they've also managed to destroy the country a lot.
okay. Yeah. The provinces are resisting. Saskatchewan is resisting. Alberta is resisting. Manitoba is not. Ontario is not. BC is not. Quebec is not. So you're looking at two provinces, really. Just I don't know what's going on in the Maritimes. Not much. Somehow they seem to be just dyed-in-the-wool liberal, like large L liberal. No matter how hard they get screwed. Yeah. So. But it's a start, It's a start. Like during COVID, we didn't have any of the elements in the system. Jason
There
Kenney in
seems
Alberta, it's horrendous. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say there seems to be a consensus forming, and it's in the infancy, but the only way out of this is Alberta and to have a public inquiry with the rule of force of law behind it to hand out subpoenas, and then hopefully from there lead to a constitutional convention, if not separation. But I think this is what Daniel Smith has been hinting at with this whole property, the land, the issue of the land, ownership of the land, and the Supreme
Mm-hmm.
Court ruling.
What's that?
Sorry?
What's that?
It was the issue. I'm not well versed in it, but it was the issue is who has ownership of Alberta's land? Is it in Alberta's hands or
Oh,
in
the
federal
resources.
government?
Yeah. Resources are provincial. There's absolutely no question about it. The trick is getting them to market.
You know, this is one of those things. I was thinking about this today. So the Constitution, again, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but the Constitution vests all of the resources of the provinces to the provinces.
Right.
But the government just comes out, the federal government's like, yeah, we're not going to give any more drilling leases. We're not going to give any more mining leases. So how do they do that?
Yeah. Well, hey, it's not my area of expertise either. But this is a lawless government. They're not even obeying court rulings that have been made recently. Not just the fact that they're appealing. There's another one that they just completely ignored. I forget what it was, but there's a lawless government. It's almost like somebody they're not a legitimate government, not legally legitimate government, right? And they're worried. That's why they really believe that the truckers were going to overthrow them because they know they're not legitimate. I mean, God Almighty, 30% of the voters voted for Trudeau. He's our prime minister. 70% voters didn't vote for him. Like, what if that's not a definition of illegitimate? What is? You know? Our system sucks. There's got to be proportional representation. Without proportional representation, there's no chance ever. Right? Bernier is an outsider. BPC is going to have problems. Not impossible. It might be a breakthrough. Who knows? Right? Stranger things have happened, but they're full force. They'll slander you and tar you with all kinds of epithets and lies and fake labels. And they'll come after you. But there's a chance if you can build your own media. Parallel systems, I've seen that bandied about. Parallel media, parallel banking, parallel food supply, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Growing systems outside the system. Not impossible. You have a chance, Payman. You have a chance.
I'm I'm not really that worried because if it was going to be easy, I wouldn't have done it. I just let somebody else run. Like if I wanted an easy win, I would have joined the conservative parties.
Right.
But the reason I joined the PPC is because I see that there's something seriously wrong with Canada. Like seriously wrong, far worse than what's going on in the US. And the Conservative Party wouldn't give me a platform to expose any of this. So I'm running for the PPC. I don't care if it's an uphill battle. I don't care if everyone thinks I'm wasting my time. My job here is to educate Canada and move it in a better direction.
Yeah, that's. I agree with you. I think that's the way to go. Funny thing. Okay, faith plays a huge part in the way you approach life in general. Okay, and I'm a shall we say lost little sheep out of the Catholic fold, right? But the more I've started to resist this agenda of tyranny, which is what it is, the more I see faith groups involved. People who are even Muslim resisting the LGBTQ agenda, right? And I decided the other day I've got this beat up old Bible. It's over 100 years old. I picked it up probably at the second. I probably picked it up, where out of Value Village. It's about 100 years old at least. And I picked it up. And I just opened it. I said, okay, I'm going to open up at random, right? And it talks about the tribe of Dan. It opened up to Judges 18 on the tribe of Dan. And so the tribe of Dan didn't have a land. Didn't hang their hat. Kind of what they were doing, wandering around the oases or what, I don't know. how they were living without land. But apparently they were. So there was a place called Laish, Laissh, it's spelled in the Bible I have. And so the Judges 18 explains how they sent spies into the city. And the people of Laish were well off, complacent, unarmed, more or less. And so the tribe of Dan came in, slaughtered them all, appointed one of their clergy as one of their own. I might have that wrong. Don't quote me on that. But the general gist of the story is that China has infiltrated Canada. Canada is unarmed and complacent. We are Laish. Canada is Laish. And China is the tribe of Dan. They've got 1.5 billion people in their country that's geographically maybe half or 2/3 the size of Canada. To them, Canada looks like a great big juicy beef steak, and they're coming for it. They've already half got it, more than half got it. Our media is our media cannot come out very much about the truth about how deeply China controls so many things. In fact, in 2000, probably was it 9 or 10, when I was just doing my city council research and going up to city council a lot, they had the. You remember they had something. Occupy Wall Street was on the art gallery lawn. They had hundreds of tents there. Meanwhile, the Chinese embassy went to Vancouver City Council and said, "We want these Falun Gong protesters off of our sidewalk." They had one wooden structure on the sidewalk outside the Chinese embassy, and I met Sima Holt. I don't know if you know who Sima Holt is. Excellent journalist.
Yeah, I Googled the name, but tell us what it is, who that is.
She was a contemporary of Jack Webster. She wrote a couple of books. She wrote one called Terror in the Name of God about the Doukhobors, and The Devil's Butler about the Hells Angels. Investigative journalist when investigative journalism actually existed. Actually, Dan Cooper's doing a great job now. That's another story. Fill that in. So anyways, protest structure bylaw came up at City Hall so they could get rid of Falun Gong's little wooden hut outside on Granville Street, Granville 16, outside the Chinese embassy. Right? Long story short, the Chinese embassy told Vancouver City Council, jump. And Vancouver City Council said, how high? Just like that. Gregor went on to marry a nice Chinese princess, by the way. Did you know that?
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, so pretty bizarre. Pretty bizarre. But yeah, so, and they got rid of the Falun Gong from in front of the Chinese embassy at the same time as, and they let the Occupy Wall Street go on for months and months and months. They finally cleared them out. But yeah, that was.
There's a lot of hypocrisy. So do you remember when the truckers got to Ottawa? They're basically labeled as terrorists. Right at the same time, those axe-wielding climate activist lunatics attacked like an entire fort in some oil community, like a oil drilling operation. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah. They haven't charged anybody with that still. Yeah, they almost killed people. They literally
Think about that, Gerry. If I came at you with an axe, I would go to jail for a very long time.
Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah. Well, nowadays maybe not. Hard to say. Depending. Depending on who the judge was and who knew who, and yeah. Oh yeah. The courts are very funny. Hinkson? Is it Hinkson? Chief Justice Hinkson screwed David Eby's regulation on drugs in parks, on doing drugs in parks. BC government, Eby he's really killed for that. Eby's a funny cat. I remember a video, and I wish I had downloaded it. It was on YouTube 15 years ago, maybe. And it was David Eby and one of his college roommates on a drunken rant. We're drunken rant. We're going to rule the world. We're going to rule the world. That was David Eby 15, 20 years ago, for real. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I wish I downloaded that.
Well, I'll get that from you, and we'll put it on. On this video overlay.
But I didn't. It's gone. It's probably gone.
Man.
I don't know. It might be. Maybe you could find it on the Wayback Machine. I don't know.
Gerry, I'm glad you mentioned that. Let's move to provincial politics. Sure. What the blank is going on with BC, specifically Bill 36, the Health Professions Act?
It's a miniature World Health Organization treaty. It's egregious. Doctors are fleeing the province. That's along with Bonnie Henry and Adrian Dix's refusal to rehire unvaccinated healthcare workers. On top of that, we've got healthcare professionals, doctors, and the near doctors. Is that practical nurse? What do they call them? The near doctor nurses. They're all fleeing. Like, why wouldn't they? Who's going to come to BC when the government can fine you $200,000 for resisting a government edict on what is very, very likely to be damaging to the patient? And the government's come between the doctor and the patient. It's absolutely insanity. It's Stalin-esque. It's like Joseph Stalin stuff. It really is. It's that bad. And most people are talking about the zombie apocalypse is that people are not storming the legislature over this. That's this real zombie apocalypse. Is anybody awake? Does anybody care? Like, what does it take? What does it take to wake them up? Stephen Malthouse is on top of that. I think what Stephen Malthouse is.
Yeah, they did you watch the National Citizens Inquiry?
I've seen clips.
Okay, that's good enough. So this is it's a civilian-led inquiry, and it went from the Maritime provinces to BC. From the Maritime provinces right up until Alberta, it was very similar. I got the vaccine, I got injured, they were mean to me at the hospital, things like that. It gets to BC, it just went to another level. They're like, BC is a test bed for the World Economic Forum. Dr. Chris Cockley, I think his name. Dr. Cockle came out and he went through Bill 36 and he said, like, here are the issues. You can copy paste legislation from other jurisdictions, from other lawmaking bodies like the WEF. And he said, like, there's a walling off of government, and it started with Harper. It got escalated under Trudeau. So, like, our country is deteriorating very quickly, and BC is like the tip of the spear.
Well, what do you mean walling off of government?
I hope I don't get it wrong. Is it the Privy Council? Well, what is that order that the Prime Minister can give and nobody else can look into it? Privy. I forget the term. I don't think it's the interim order. It's the. It'll come to me and I'll put it over the video.
Sure. But
yeah, so it's like the.
I don't understand that term, walling off.
Oh, it's like instead of it being transparent, so the Prime Minister saying, like, we're going to spend this much money on this, the Prime Minister goes in a room with his cabinet, they make a decision, and then nobody is allowed to ask, what decision did you make?
Black box.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, big time, yeah. They're like, yeah, it's dictatorship. Another term for it. It's dictatorship. That's what yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. Bill 36, for the benefit of the audience, it basically gets rid of doctor-patient confidentiality. And I went through and I identified the 4 sections that bring that about. I'm not a lawyer, so I go to my lawyer. I'm like, is it true that these 4 sections get rid of doctor-patient confidentiality? And my lawyer, his response to me was, you do realize that doctor-patient confidentiality is just a creation of the legislature. They can take it away. And I'm telling him, I'm like, yeah, but that's not the contract that you had with the people. Like, when someone goes to the doctor, they don't assume that it's doctor-patient confidentiality unless the legislature revokes it. They assume it comes from God, basically. And they because they know no one's watching the legislature, they're just changing these things, and the frustration is building up, and I don't think they realize, like, there's a reckoning coming, and when people start getting really angry, and I think it's starting to happen because we're running out of money and people can't buy bread.
Well, that was the French Revolution. They were fine with tyranny as long as they had their bread and circuses, right? And the funny thing about that is that climate played a key role in the French Revolution because they had horrific harvests for a few years in a row, and that's when shit hit the fan. People were starving. Same now. Food bank clientele is exploding. People can't pay their rent. People can't eat. All of a sudden, it's like, what the fuck's going on here? Yeah. Oh, yeah. What do you do? Where do you go? Who do we see? Who can fix this? You know, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, bread and circuses. As long as they're giving us bread and circuses, they'll be fine. But they're trying to take away the bread now. And that's the attack on farming. Germany and Paris are in turmoil right now, and most of the population of the rest of the world don't even know about it. But there's a huge protest. It's a farmers' protest in Germany, and I heard they blocked all the roads to Paris. I heard they blocked Amazon warehouses. Right? Oh yeah, that'll get a reaction. Oh yeah. Well, see, Germany's so far left or right, but of course that was Nazism too. You know, it just seems that if you don't learn from history, you repeat it, and they seem to have overlearned and are repeating it in Germany.
Yeah, Europe is a mess.
Bad government. Yeah. We're on the brink of World War III because of this stuff, and that's depopulation agenda. What do you know, right? The elite will be safe. They've got mile deep bunkers all throughout the world.
Oh, they're far away from the front line anyway. It's always it's usually the conflict zones in the Middle East, but if it's Europe, it's Ukraine, somewhere. It's not in Brussels, that's for sure. Or Luxembourg.
Yeah. Well, like I say, they've got their mile deep bunkers with 10 years of food and air supply down there. That's depopulation because it comes full circle. You look at everything going on; it always comes back to depopulation. Yeah.
It's too big. It's too big of a story, though. Nobody believes it because it's difficult for us to believe that people are that evil.
That's why they're getting away with it so far. Yeah, that's why they're getting away with it. Can I show you my climate library?
Sure, go ahead.
Or a piece of it. Yeah. Ugh. It includes some. I'll start with the worst offenders. Actually, where are we? There. Here's a good one. These guys. Can you see that?
Atmosphere of Hope, Searching for Solutions to the Climate Crisis. Who's it by? Tim
Flannery.
Tim Flannery. Okay.
Tim Flannery is a kangaroo guy. Australian. The kangaroo guy. He's famous for discovering some unknown species of kangaroos in far off forests of the tropics. Right. That's what he's done all his life. Somehow he became the Labor's climate consultant. Prophesied that the rivers and reservoirs would be dry within 5 or 10 years. They built billions and billions of dollars worth of desalination plants that are now rusting as the reservoirs are full. That's Tim Flannery. I call him, Tim Flannery. Kangaroo guy, for God's sakes. It's as bad as Greta. Greta probably knows more reality about climate than Tim Flannery. I call him Flim Flam. I call him Flim Flam Flannery, right? And so, yeah, I bought the book because you need to know. You need to know what your adversary is thinking, how they're thinking, what they're thinking. This guy's a freaking kangaroo guy. Give me a break. So, anyways, this one is just this is grifting.
Building the green economy, success stories from the grassroots. It looks like what do you call it? Cookbook.
How to have fun and make money extracting taxpayers' money. Yeah. Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff. Merchants of Despair by Robert Zubrin. This is a reaction to Naomi Klein's Merchants of, what was it?
Probably, I'm guessing Merchants of Death.
Naomi Klein wrote a book saying that the oil companies knew 40 years ago, 50 years ago, that their emissions were going to cause disastrous global warming, blah, 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 blah. Well, this outlines how bad climate policy is killing millions of people right now.
Gerry, can you go ahead and show us what's your last book? The
It's
Merchant
called
of
Eco-Imperialism. Okay, show you that one. Okay, Merchants of Death. Basically, how bad climate policy is killing more people than weather ever will. Paul Dreesen is a great writer. He works with Committee for Constructive Tomorrow and also works with Heritage Foundation in the United States. It's a conservative think tank known in the mainstream media as a far-right radical, misogynist fringe element. So anyways, Paul Dreesen, Eco-Imperialism, Green Power, Black Death. So true. People are being denied the basics of life today. 4 million people a year die from indoor air pollution. Those are United Nations figures. United Nations vouch for those figures. 4 million people a year, because they cannot access cheap, scalable, distributable fossil fuel energy. They're dying from indoor air pollution because they cannot get the energy. They're being strangled by the World Bank, which refuses to finance anything that isn't a windmill or a solar panel. Yeah, it's nothing. Now this is interesting. Remember Michael Crichton? I don't know if it's Crichton.
yeah.
Crichton. Okay. Yeah, he wrote a novel about a climate eco-terrorism. Basically, it's about eco-terrorism, and we're witnessing it now with the arsons in the forest, and how much of it is green terrorism, and how much of it is Islamic terrorism, because we're heavily infiltrated. It's hard to know, but it's still eco-terrorism. And this is a great one. The deniers. Is a who's who of serious scientists, including a statistics guy who completely demolished Michael Mann's hockey stick analysis. You've heard of the hockey stick graph, Michael Mann?
Yeah, IPCC was IPCC or COP7, the whole fiasco where there was two and they went with the one that they gave him the hockey stick thingy.
Yeah, it was in assessment report 3. I don't know what COP it was. But the AR3, we're on AR6 now, I think. They come out every 4 or 5 years. And AR3 had the hockey stick graph on it, and people were suitably panicked and freaked out. And then it just disappeared because he got so completely demolished by real scientists and real mathematicians. His scientific methodology was so bad that it's almost laughable. In fact, he sued David Ball, who was a Canadian fella who I had met, passed away now, had a bad heart and couldn't get treated during COVID. So Michael Mann was ordered to produce his data in a BC court, and he couldn't do it. He refused. He ended up in contempt of court, and they were going to throw the book at him. And then David Ball, they just outwaited David Ball. They just waited for David Ball to die. But his son is still around. He's on my Facebook. Anyways, here we go. He wrote David. Is it? I forget if David is the son's name or the main man's name. But he wrote a book called The Deliberate Corruption of Climate Science, and it details how bad it is. This one is very interesting. It's if you write this down and try to find this book. See if you can find
Let me stop you there. Can I buy that from you or borrow it? I can't find that online.
No, because it's basic because two things. Yes, it's like when Wayne Gretzky bought up all the copies of his wife's Playboy.
It's impossible to find that.
Yeah, it's the same thing, right? Because it's an expose on the whole thing. Yeah, you can. Yeah, I've actually got two. Imagine I got two.
Well,
It's impossible to find. Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
And it goes on about Maurice Strong and how he's quoted as saying, "Is it not our responsibility to destroy Western industrial society?" Which is exactly what they're doing. Exactly what they're trying to do. Yeah, Folker Green's a good one. Elaine Dewar. I actually I don't know if I talked to her on the phone or if I just had her on Twitter or something, but she's still she's actually a greenie, and she's all in on the climate hoax still, even though that's seen as a destructive expose on the whole foundation of the hoax. But like I said, they don't need it anymore because they've got COVID and they've got the pandemic treaty. That goes into some of the that goes into ClimateGate and how bad policy is killing people, et cetera, et cetera. This is his second most recent book. He's written another one called Fossil Future, I believe. Epstein is superb. He's a very bright kid. He's also an entrepreneur. He makes money doing it. Enough. ClimateGate, the crew tape letters. Crew tape. CRU is a climate research unit at the University of East Anglia, and they were the ones who were implicated in ClimateGate. Well, here's a gem.
I remember that. Yeah.
Here's a gem. Generation Us, the challenge. All they do is regurgitate IPCC boilerplate crap, right? The whole book is IPCC boilerplate crap. But remember, Andrew Weaver was leader of the Greens for a while.
I was going to say, if once you've read one United Nations document, you pretty much read them all. Like they just have this canon, and there's a couple of words in there: equity, inclusion, sustainable, and they just shoot it in the document. It doesn't matter how the words land; they publish it.
Yeah. Roosters of the Apocalypse: How the Junk Science of Global Warming Nearly Bankrupted the Western World. Well, it has now.
Yeah, I would remove the word "nearly" in the next edition.
Yeah, it's an old book. Yeah, exactly. Mirrors and Mazes: A Guide Through the Climate Change Debate by Howard Thomas Brady. I haven't really dug into this too much, but it's more or less skeptic. All right. Let's see what the A beacon of light to see through the cloudy attempts to demonize CO2 as the satanic gas of our times. It is a must-read and welcome contribution to the educational aspect of this hot scientific debate. Dr. Willie Soon, senior researcher, Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, USA. Dr. Willie Soon actually has been demonized and deplatformed. He basically is a sun guy. He shows how the sun is the mediator of climate and climate change.
No.
Not to fear a bright future for fossil fuel, the story of fossil fuels and climate change. It goes through some of the same stuff. A lot of it is.
Gerry,
Yeah.
Gerry, we're approaching the end of the show.
Great.
I didn't tell you I wanted you to do this, but
Sure.
why don't you take a moment and do a plug for your company? So in case anybody's watching, they might call you up.
Yeah, sure. Ace Limousine, 604-961-9123. Did you hear that? 604-961-9123. Ace Limousine, based downtown, but we go all throughout the Upper Fraser Valley, the lower and Upper Fraser Valley, and Metro Vancouver suburbs.
Yeah, well, hopefully anybody watching this show, next time they're downtown and they'll call you, they'll be like, "Hey, I watched that podcast. You're the guy that ran for mayor."
Yeah, in 2011. Yeah, November 18, 2011. Good times. Okay. Super duper.
Well, we're at the end of the show. I wanted to thank you for coming on. I don't know if I told you this, but it's actually like I'm really impressed that you're like me, just an ordinary, average citizen, and you stepped up and you tried to run for public office.
Yeah,
And
make a difference.
you should be very proud of what you've done.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. And same for you. Like you got some good work ahead of you, and it's funny how it can have a real positive effect now and through the years too. Yeah.
All you need is a couple of good men to step up. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Gerry. And to everyone, thanks for watching.